I have in my possession a secret map by the planners of the New World Order.
Because the global order is changing again.
A new world order.
Linked up for May 21st, 2024 on Mark13News.com is, as you can see, Russia's strengthening anti-Western alliance, Russia being the current king of the North according to the Daniel 11 hypothesis on BiblicalResearchLabs.com, and it's at this time the Ezekiel 38 Confederacy continues to formulate because of the Kenites on the multipolar end of the globalist spectrum. And as you can see in Daniel chapter 11 verse 15, so the king of the North shall come, meaning the Russian Federation, which is the third king of the North, the first two being Tsarist Russia followed by the Soviet Union, and cast up a mound and take the most fenced cities, which not only has to do with the Russian Federation's obvious military operations, but also the hidden agents of Edom working covertly through the media outlets and political parties of the West, and the arms of the South, the current king of the South being the United States, the first two being the United Kingdom, including the British Commonwealth, and Germany shall not withstand neither his chosen people, meaning his elected officials, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. And as you can see in an article published by CNN back in August of 2023 called Newly Declassified U.S. Intel Claims Russia is Laundering Propaganda Through Unwitting Westerners, Russian intelligence is operating a systematic program to launder pro-Kremlin propaganda through private relationships between Russian operatives and unwitting U.S. and Western targets, according to newly declassified U.S. intelligence. U.S. intelligence agencies believe that the Russian Federal Security Service is attempting to influence public policy and public opinion in the West by directing Russian civilians to build relationships with influential U.S. and Western individuals and then disseminate narratives that support Kremlin objectives, obscuring the FSB's role through layers of ostensibly independent actors. And then an article published on VoiceOfAmerica.com in April of 2024 called How Russia's Disinformation Campaign Seeps into U.S. Views says on a near-daily basis, Scott Cullinane talks with members of Congress about Russia's war in Ukraine, but as lawmakers debated a $95 billion package that includes about $60 billion in aid for Ukraine, Cullinane noticed an increase in narratives alleging Ukrainian corruption. What stood out is that these were the same talking points promoted by Russian disinformation. So when the Washington Post published an investigation into an extensive and coordinated Russian campaign to influence U.S. public opinion to deny Ukraine the aid, Cullinane says he was not surprised and believes that Russia's best chance for victory is not on the battlefield but through information operations targeted on Western capitals, including Washington. And again, it's the multipolarist Kenites through Edom as opposed to the unipolarist Kenites through the left-right paradigm, which is symbolized by Ammon and Moab, which is really Stalinism and Trotskyism. And operating within the left-right paradigm and media of the West are also the hidden agents of Edom working to introduce geopolitical disorder into internal American activity, encouraging all kinds of separatism and ethnic, social, and racial conflicts, actively supporting all dissident movements, extremist, racist, and sectarian groups, thus destabilizing internal political processes in the U.S., as Alexander Dugin wrote in his book Foundations in Geopolitics. And Alexander Dugin's daughter was quoted as saying, "We all understand that this conflict is not between Russia and Ukraine. This conflict is between the two blocks of multipolarity and of the unipolarity. Unfortunately, Ukraine is being held as the life shield of the unipolar world. Nation shall rise against nation means the Kenite nation rising up against itself through two warring factions within the shadow government thereof, which is symbolized by the he-goat of Daniel chapter 8, and the great horn of the he-goat is the United Nations, in my opinion. As John Foster Dulles wrote all the way back in 1950, the United Nations represents not a final stage in the development of world order, but only a primitive stage. Therefore, its primary task is to create the conditions which will make possible a more highly developed organization, which is basically the same thing Zbigniew Brzezinski wrote in 1997 on the last page of the Grand grand chessboard, 1997 being the same year Alexander Dugin wrote Foundations in Geopolitics. But no matter how much the robbers of thy people, as they're called in Daniel 11:14, exalt themselves to establish the vision, meaning the vision of a one-world system to replace the United Nations, they shall fall, which is a word translated from the Hebrew, which in this case means to fail, because the one-world political system written of in Revelation 13 won't come into being until the woe of the fifth trumpet, when Satan and his angels get cast to earth, which is when the he-goat of Daniel chapter 8 will become the leopard of Daniel chapter 7, symbolic of the Kenites and their four hidden dynasties providing the infrastructure of the one-world system. And it's also at that time the Ezekiel 38 Confederacy will become the bear of Daniel chapter 7, which is the fourth king of the north, with the fourth king of the south being the lion, which is symbolic of the Christian nations up until the woe of the sixth trumpet, when Satan appears as the Antichrist in Jerusalem, because that's when most Christians will be killed spiritually when they worship Satan instead of Christ, which is what Antichrist means. Those three horns that get plucked up by the roots you can read of in Daniel chapter 7 verse 8 being symbolic of the Christian nations ceasing to be Christian nations, and those three horns are the same thing as the three ribs that will be in the mouth of the bear at the woe of the sixth trumpet, as you can see in Daniel chapter 7 verse 5, because again, that's when the Christian nations become non-Christian nations, those three being Ephraim, which is the United Kingdom, including the British Commonwealth, Judah, which is Germany, who will have most likely by that time filled in the post-Brexit power vacuum, so then Germany including Europe, and Manasseh, which is the United States. The true Christ won't return until 2.5 months later at the woe of the seventh trumpet, or 70 evenings, which are what the 70 years in captivity to the Babylon of old were a type of.
Let me warn you,
A new world order.
and let me warn the nation.
A new world order.
Let me warn you,
A new world order.